Great. Thank you. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 12th, special called meeting of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. We're public hearing today. Good evening, gentlemen. Sorry, we're just getting going. Just before we start, I did want to let especially the staff here and the commission know that we've had a lot of conversations over the last few weeks trying to have create clarity around what we're allowed and not allowed to do, specifically on issues related to Marsh Lane, McDaniel Lane. And as I explained the enforcement process mandated by the state over and over and over again, it finally struck me that the appropriate action was to work on changing what we can do in terms of enforcement. And so I've been meeting with League of Oregon Cities, Tigard, Beaverton, Eugene, many cities, looking at how we can advocate and prepare for an ordinance that demands reform on Measure 110 so that we do not have to tolerate public drug use on our streets. And I believe that will make a significant impact, because what we know overall about what's happening is that there is a crossover here that's very specific to drug use. We all see that. And that won't be an immediate change that will need the state to change their laws, but we very much understand that the state will be working on Measure 110 reform in the short session. And so we are going to prepare, or my hope, I'll be taking it to council for discussion tonight, but my hope is that council will prepare so that as soon as the day that reform goes into effect, that we are prepared to have enforcement and not allow public drug use on our streets anymore. And I hope that that will deliver some real results here. With that, I would like to officially call the meeting to order. I would ask our clerk to do a roll call.
Yes, Mayor Dropkin.
I'm here.
Commissioner Tankersley.
Here.
Commissioner Gormley.
Here.
Commissioner Christensen.
Here.
Commissioner Tate.
Here.
And for presentation purposes, do we want the video on for the council chamber?
No, that's later. This is the water rate hearing.
So that we don't show us on the video. Okay,
We're going to be going to the.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to be holding a public hearing tonight. We, if need be, will impose reasonable time limits on participants and receive documents and reports into the hearing record. Today's hearing, the commission should expect to hear a staff report. And during the staff report, I may recognize other members of the commission to ask questions of staff. After the staff report, interested parties will be invited to ask questions. Before stating your question, please state your name for the record. And today's meeting is being held in a hybrid format, both in person and digitally on Zoom. And I'll now provide an overview of some important procedural items to ensure the meeting runs smoothly for everyone participating. Any interested party that has joined the public hearing on Zoom is automatically set to be on mute and to have their video display hidden. At the appropriate times during the meeting, I will ask those in attendance whether they would like to speak. When this occurs, please select the raise hand option from your device. From the revealed toolbar, select participants and then select raise hand at the bottom of the participants tool. When you have selected raised hand, the staff person managing the meeting will know that you'd like to ask a question. If you're having difficulty using the raise your hand feature in Zoom, you may also use the chat feature and type in that you would like to speak. This is being monitored. And again, if you're using the chat, please note your name and address for the record and confirm that you wish to ask a question of staff about water rates. If you're calling in via Zoom and do not have access, if you're calling in via phone and do not have access to the Zoom meeting and toolbar, please wait until I ask if there's anyone on the phone who wants to ask a question. I will make sure that everyone who wants to participate in the public hearing this evening has an opportunity to do so. The commission may have questions for the interested parties who speak during the meeting, and staff will be offered an opportunity for final comment. And finally, the commission will deliberate and consider the proposed resolution and attached rate schedule. And then I do just want everybody to know that we have a meeting also at 5:30 in council chambers over Civic Hall. And so we do want to be conscientious of that as well. And we will do both those things, make sure that everybody has adequate time to speak and be mindful of another public meeting. And so let's turn this over to our utility rate analyst, Trina McManus, who will begin with staff report. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Trina McManus, and I'm the utility rate analyst for McMinnville Water and Light. I've worked for the utility for the last 13 years and have focused on rates and cost of service for about the last 2.5 years. I've been working with Finance Director Mark Dunmeyer on the latest revisions to the cost of service model and also work closely with our consultants throughout the process. We are here this afternoon to conduct a public hearing on changes to water rates and charges. MW&L consultant Mark Beauchamp of Utility Financial Solutions presented the results of the latest water cost of service analysis in June of 2022. At that time, Mr. Beauchamp presented a 4-year rate track with a 2% overall increase in rates each year. However, due to projected negative operating income in fiscal year 23, 24, and beyond in the water division, staff asked UFS to take another look at the cost of service with updated budget numbers and provide an updated rate design recommendation. Mr. Beauchamp is here today via Zoom to present the information requested for commission consideration. Mr. Beauchamp is the president of UFS and has over 30 years of experience in the utility environment. He has completed cost of service and rate studies for more than 200 municipal systems around the United States and has served as an expert witness in rate cases. Mark is recognized as a national expert in his field and often speaks at conferences and presents to industry organizations. Mark, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
There we go. Thank you, Trina, and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. Trina kind of gave you a background. Last year, we presented 2 different rate tracks for the board to consider. One was a 2% annual adjustment over the next 5 years, and the other one was a 2.5%. And the board opted for the 2%. And back in the spring, I was notified that 2 things happened, which I'll kind of go through 2 significant changes that occurred. One was in the sales of water that was originally used in the budget process for 2022. And some of the changes that happened there, as well as in the capital improvement program. And as a result of that, in order to keep your cash reserves at somewhat of a stable level, we needed to modify the rate track. And I'll go through the rationale and customer impacts. And what we're proposing is a series of 3.5% increases for the next 4 years. So, Trina, can I go ahead and share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to.
This slide shows the 2 significant changes that had occurred. One of them, this was the original CIP that's shown up over here. And you can see this is the revised CIP, and the big change is projected to happen in 2026, where the capital improvement program in total over this period of time is projected to change by about $5 million, increase by $5 million. That's one of the significant changes. The other one is the growth. We had originally assumed a 0.5% growth rate between 2023 and 2027. But due to sales and the projections, they have been revised. And what we've seen is a 1.9% reduction that's projected for 2023 and a 6.9% reduction in water sales in 2024. And then after that point in time, we stuck with the 0.5% adjustment or growth rates. when we look at the original rate track, this is the rate track that was board approved by the board last year. And you can see that with the 2% adjustments right here, our cash reserves, which is the primary driver, the minimum reserves about 10 or 11 million. And you can see the cash balances, which are at starting at 22 million in 2023. We're projected to stay relatively stable throughout the projection period and the 5-year period at about the same amount, around 23 million. In order to keep the cash or the financial projections somewhat similar to what was recognized by the board last year, what we needed to do was to adjust the 2% adjustments. For some reason I can't see my cursor. Let me see. Okay, maybe this will work better. To 3.5% adjustments, and we set it at 3.5 to attempt to keep the cash balances relatively stable over the projection period. You can see that we're starting again around 22,300,000. With this projection, our cash is actually projected to drop by about $3 million. That's primarily driven because of the $5 million increase in the construction in the capital improvement program. So you do see some fluctuations in cash. It goes to 21 million, drops 18 million, drops to 14 million, and then it ends the projection at about 19 million. So that's probably one of the most significant questions for the board, is if they want to move the rate adjustment from the 2% adjustment that was originally projected to the 3.5%. Now, to do the 3.5%, if you to get an idea of the customer impacts and how we propose the rate designs, the consumption charges that we're proposing would increase on average about 4.6%. So like the inside consumption rate would go from, well, $1.65 up to $1.73, $1.81, and $1.89. That's in the first block. The excess would go from $1.88 to $1.97, $2.06, and $2.15. And again, that represents about a 4.6% adjustment. The customer charge, or the fixed charge, is currently at $14.55. We're proposing a very slight adjustment each year. Like the primary, most of your customers are in the 5/8 to 3/4 inch meter. So we're looking at like a 30-cent adjustment each year, 35% to bring it from $14.55 to $15.30 over that 3-year period. And that represents about a 1.7% increase annually in the customer charge. Now, we also have some other rates like bulk filling stations, fire lines inside and outside. And you can see that the filling station, of course, we're looking at the cost of service results. So the impact on them is relatively small. It's a small revenue class also, but it's about 1.4%. And then the fire lines, both inside and outside, would increase by approximately 4% each year. And then the access charges inside and outside would increase at about 4.5%. Now, when we look at the impacts, the typical residential customer uses about 900 cubic feet a month. So they're going to see, as a result of this increase, a little less than $1 increase each month in their water bills. About 90 cents to $1. Some of the larger users may see a little bit more, like $1.25 to $1.40. But most customers, residential customers, will fall within that range. So I'm kind of opening it up to any questions at this point.
Here.
Mark, it's Tom Tankersley. I had a question. There's another slide you had that had that showed what was happening with, with our operating income, net operating income?
Yes, the operating income,
that.
which is, yeah, this is the one right here. In the original model, the adjusted operating income, which was projected at about 3 million, drops to about 2.5 million. Now, one of the things when we do the adjust,
I'm sorry, Mark, I meant net income, the income over the expenses. It
yeah,
was after these and it showed, the chart that I have showed a loss of a little over $325,000 in 23-24, a little over $300,000 in 24-25, and 325,000 again in 25-26.
It's the wrong mark. It's this mark.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. That's your chart.
Yeah.
Yep. So, okay. So I don't know. Have you seen that chart at all, Mark Beauchamp?
yeah, I think I saw it when this projection was originally put together. There's a couple of things that are different, the way that we look at it and the way that is presented to you. When we look at it for rate making purposes, you have a certain amount of your assets that are what we call contributed capital. In other words, developers may build out a subdivision and pay for the infrastructure and then donate that infrastructure to the utility. When, for purposes of rate making, we exclude the depreciation expense on those assets in establishing rates. And the reason is because you didn't pay for those assets. Yes, you have the responsibility to eventually replace them. But when it comes to depreciation expense and rate setting, that depreciation expense is normally, most rate analysts, and I agree with it, would be excluded to avoid double charging customers. Now, what we do recover through contributed capital is the inflationary increase in eventual replacement costs. So to give you an example of that, if you had $1 million of contributed assets, we're not going to be charging depreciation expense on that $1 million, but we will be recognizing in our rate, establishing rates, that we need to set aside an additional 30,000 a year approximately to for the inflationary increase in the eventual replacement. So, but that's the primary difference between what you're looking at here and what you look at in the financial statements that are presented to you.
So to make sure I understand, because you don't have as much depreciation
Correct.
as it pertains to the contributed capital, you wouldn't show as much of a loss. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
But then but it's not the complete amount of depreciation because our accounting system doesn't take into account that $30,000 you talked about, right? The increase in value to replace it.
That's correct.
So do you have any idea how that balances?
Well, first of all, that inflationary number that I'm referring to, you
Yes.
see this optimal operating income target?
Right.
You see it fluctuates from 3 to 5 million. That is the inflationary increase in replacement cost of assets. So in an ideal world, we would want to hit that number. Part of the reason I don't, in the case of McMinnville, why I'm not recommending you go fully to the operating income is because you have strong cash reserves. And I'm hesitant to move your rates up to the optimal operating income, which will add even more cash. Because right now you're very financially stable, and we're trying to keep you that way. And sometimes it's going to sound weird, but having too much cash can be almost as controversial for a utility as not having enough. And so
Well, I
we're
think-
trying to do the balance.
I think as a public utility, a publicly owned utility, we don't want to have more cash than we think we need because we want the customers to get the benefit of low rates.
Correct.
But if I look at this, sort of the same way of coming to the same thing, your projected cash balances are going way down and at one point it bumps much closer to the recommended minimum, which is something that I've never experienced in my time on the board. And the second thing is that if you look at did we change slides there? What?
Yeah, I changed slides because I wanted to explain why that's happening. But no, I can go back to it.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is that we have lost money, right? Even by new theory during this period.
I don't believe you have, not if you made that adjustment for contributed capital.
Okay, I mean, but when in the past, when we've struggled with, we wanted to be sure we weren't selling water for less than what it costs us to produce. We've always used the accounting method and not your method, right?
No, I've always used this method. I think I've been doing the water rates in McMinnville for probably 10 years.
Yeah, but we've also not had losses on the accounting side, or if we did, it was a small one, and we're gonna fix it the next year, right?
You're talking about the operating income.
The operating income.
Maybe when we get, or we can do it now, I can explain a little bit more on the page that you were looking at that highlighted our budget view of the financials. But
Okay, well, I know you wanted to explain something, and I'm happy to hear that. What I'm concerned about is that and I understand we had extra income last year or the year just ended, and I understand that we may want to not raise over the 3.5% next year for 2023, 24. But I'm concerned that we're projecting out what looks to me, the way we've always done our books, a loss for the next 3 years after that. And we're getting our cash balance will be $3 million less. And I'm concerned about that. And I wonder where I'm headed is I wonder if we want to increase the volumetric charge, not for next year, but for the rest of the year, the other years, 24, 25, 26, and 27 on this chart.
so I could just add, oh, sorry, Mark.
No, you go ahead.
So when we did our budget, just finished our 23-24 budget, when we did that budget on the revenues, the water revenues, based on how we thought 22-23 would come in. That estimate was done from looking at the actual revenues through fiscal year 22-23 up through March. We estimated April, May, and June. And that estimate was basically looking at the prior year weather forecast, and it generated a little bit more revenue in those 3 months. And that's what we estimated our 22-23 revenue, which then plays into what we estimate for 23-24. So that estimate was low, significantly low, which I highlighted in that spreadsheet. And I went back and I recalculated that if I had used the historical average as opposed to kind of prior year with weather information, it would have generated an additional about $200,000 for 22-23, which would have translated to 23-24 budget estimate as well.
Okay.
So I think what I want to do in the future is use that method because interestingly, the prior year we were about $200,000 below the average. This year we're about $250,000 above. So the weather just can really vary, and that takes some of that variation out.
That
When
makes
you,
sense to me that you would use the historic averages rather than what could be an anomalous year.
yeah, so when I apply the rate track increases, the 2% and the 3.5%, it generates higher numbers than what we show right now, applying those to what we have budgeted in our budget documents. So a 3.5 generates in 23-24 a loss of, I think, around 185 or 6,000. I think it's about $245,000 loss with a 2% rate increase. So
What about subsequent years?
subsequent years with a 3.5, it's about level. It's increasing if you do a 2% rate increase.
So the loss is level, not the, okay.
Yeah.
And that's 200 and what,
It's about 186,000.
186,000?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you solved half the problem.
Another thing that's different too is when Mark presents this information, he includes the rate increase. When we show the budget does not include the rate increase because it's not approved. So,
I'm sorry, this chart here, the one that he didn't have on his,
right,
that it shows numbers with updated rate design increase, right?
it does. This one does, but I meant in the budget document itself that we put together.
But I meant this is the one I'm concerned about, and that has the $186,000 of losses, right?
Mhm. It does, this document, this one that you see is based on, it's higher, it's like
Right.
325. But
Right.
yes, if we were to apply an updated average revenue, it would be about 186 with 3.5. And that would be consistent across those 3 years.
So I'm not as concerned, like I said, you solved half the problem there, because I think it is legitimate and appropriate to use historical averages. But if we go with the 3.5, I would want us to look at this very, very carefully after next year to see whether we need to go higher, to see what's happening. I'm comfortable doing the 3.5 this year because we had such a good year and people can, and we're not going to be sending the wrong signal, I don't think. But if we looked at this, even at the $180,000 a year loss, I think we're selling water for less than what it costs us to produce.
And so one of the things we're going to do also is we're going to do cost of service next year. So that we don't get behind on these kind of increases and have those kind of losses.
Yeah, so we originally asked the consultant to give us a 4-year rate track, but after this last budget cycle, we realized there's just too many variants to try to project out for 4 years. So staff will be coming to the commission this next spring to ask for a contract to do another full cost of service for water this next spring and summer, so we can come back with an entirely new recommendation. And we will be on a cycle of doing that every other year moving forward to keep a tighter eye on the balances moving forward.
I just wanted to clarify or make sure I'm right about the fact that we never did a cash reserve policy over this last year. Did we do that? We did not do that. So at the hearing that we had last year with Mark, that was one of his recommendations to do that, not before we had the hearing, but a few months into the year, to try to get that done. And we never did that. And I feel like that really will bring up some conversations about, our projected cash balances, how we're using the money from, timber sales and other things, whether it gets, we start looking at separating that into different pots for maintenance and repairs versus capital improvements. And so I just feel like that's a whole discussion that can be had after this rate hearing and preparation for the next cost of service analysis, because then maybe we can give Mark some other sort of directives as far as some decisions that we've made about how we're going to use our money.
Commissioner Tate, we do have that list of outstanding items that came out of that work session in July, and we do plan on following up with the commission on some updates to all of those items, including the cash reserve policy, probably in October.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Beauchamp, do you care to continue?
I'm pretty much complete with the presentation. It's, the rate design part of it is one of the things we didn't touch on very strongly. The consumption charges went up 4.6%. Whoops, and the meter charges about 1.7 to 3%. And so with the rate design that we did by putting more into the consumption charge, it's going to have most likely a larger impact on bigger users than it will smaller users. So I just want to make you aware of that.
Any additional questions for Mr. Beauchamp right now?
No.
Thank you.
Just one last thing, the meter charge, the reason we only increased that by 1.7 is we used the cost of service study. And the cost of service study actually came out around 15, I believe. So we only moved it up slightly because, again, to try to be consistent with the cost of service results.
Thank you. Mr. Dunmeyer.
I looked at my notes, the operating loss with the 3.5% based on the historical averages we talked about. I think it said 185, it's 139.
Oh, it's even better.
Yeah, across. So around that range across the 3 years. So, yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Unless there's questions for me.
I just want to look at one thing. If I can quickly identify the depreciation expense I'm backing out.
I do have one other thing I'd like to discuss when you're done with this.
Pulling up the wrong file. Sorry about that.
Maybe while you look for that, I'll just raise the something that I haven't quite figured how we might have some resolve around, but something that's unique this year, of course, is that we have a new fire district. And we have currently fire line inside, fire line outside the city. And the new fire district would be evaluating it. I'm not even quite sure what my question is, other than the sensitivity with the new fire district and how we can make sure of supporting that effort and success.
So typically the fire lines are not paid by the fire department, they're paid by the property owner.
Oh,
The hydrants are paid by the fire department.
okay.
So.
And those aren't changing. Great, thank you. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Beauchamp.
Yeah, I do. This is the actual financial model. I just want to go through, and this is the contributed capital depreciation expense, 350,000 a year. Our adjusted operating income, whoops, also adds back timber sales, which is the primary driver, as well as in-kind contributions to get at the adjusted operating income of that 3.6 million and what we're looking at here. And I'm not sure if in your what you're looking at, if the timber sales are included. I'm assuming that they're treated as other income. I treat it as an offset.
Mark, we've never included timber sales and operating income. I don't think it is an operating income. We've always treated it as a source of capital improvements, and I am concerned that you are treating timber sales as operating income in your analysis.
That's one of the things that we can modify. Obviously, that's a pretty substantial rate adjustment if we excluded it. And what would happen, and this is of course a decision for the board, if
Not included that.
So this
That'd
is,
be about a 27% rate increase if that was excluded. And what would happen, of course, is the cash balances will go up by $2.5 million every year. So after, a relatively short period of time, your cash balances will be substantial. Now, obviously, as a board, if you wanted that excluded, we certainly can. I would probably recommend that we do it over time.
Excuse me.
If you
Mark,
wanted
as I
those
look
cash
at-
balances higher.
Excuse me, as I look at your chart there, you're showing us, it looks like timber sales are other income and expense,
Mhm.
and it's part of your non-operating income and expense, right?
Because
It
your operating expenses are 6.8 million.
Correct.
They're not,
Maybe I'm not understanding your terminology, but
Yeah, no, that's fine. This format that I'm showing you is basically your accounting format. Okay,
right, yeah.
but for rates purposes, we make certain adjustments to the accounting format, including adding back, in a sense, timber sales and in-kind contributions in cash. So we're taking your operating income from an accounting basis and we're making adjustments to it.
So Mark, are you, you're essentially taking all of our, effectively our income statement to calculate a rate. And I think what happens when we do our budget, we look at operating income as well as net income and cash reserves. We look at all three of those. So you're kind of combining all of those together to come up with a rate. So the concern I think we've had is we recognize that from maybe a non-operating income perspective, we don't see it necessarily a driver for considering a rate change, but from an operating income, we show an operating loss that created some concern, especially when we had an $800,000 loss. We made some cuts. We get it to 567,000. And that's why we felt that we needed to look at the possibility of adjusting our rate. So I think maybe that's part of the difference is when you're doing your rate, estimating a rate increase for us, you're looking at everything. We kind of look at things individually. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. When we look at designing a rate track, for example, there's two things we're trying to accomplish. One, in my opinion, of course, the most important thing is to keep the utility financially stable. And the second thing is to balance that with rate impacts on customers. And in order to balance it, we use three targets. The first one, which is debt coverage ratio, you're very fortunate utility in that you don't have any debt. So that operating income target that I use to compare, which has that timber sales rolled into it, that's included in this optimal operating income target. Okay. This is last year's, the 2023 projection, but this is what we're doing to calculate your adjusted operating income to compare it to the optimal target. But we're also trying to balance that with cash balances, because if we were to hit this target every year, that's going to add a substantial amount to me. That'd be pretty close. You can see what happens here. Cash, it goes from like 22 million to almost 31 million. So at that point, we start getting a little uncomfortable that we, because the rate impacts on customers now are 6% annually rather than 2%. So it becomes a bit of a balance, and that's the subjectivity that I look to the board to give me input and feedback on where that balance is. You know, obviously I have my own opinions about it, but what I think isn't really important is what you think. So.
I could maybe share one additional thing I looked at this afternoon. I came up with pretty close to what you did, Mark. I on the sheet that I calculated, I did a 5.5% increase, and that was about break even for 23-24 based on average historical calculation of revenues. With a 3.5 the following years, that kept everything even, that break even. But the reason I wouldn't suggest necessarily considering that. I mean, obviously, like Mark said, it would be a commission decision, but when I looked at that, I also looked at what have we collected this year so far in July and August for revenues, and we're up about 146,000 above where we were last year. It was really interesting. I didn't think this summer was that significant, but this was one of our highest water sale summers.
My water bill attests that it's an expensive summer, so.
I think it was driven by just not a lot of rain and consistent warm days, and so it just took more water to keep people's irrigation doing what they wanted it to do. So anyway, with that extra 100, so the 5.5% generated about another, I think it was 140 or 141,000. Well, we actually have collected that in the first couple of months. So I personally am comfortable with a 3.5. I think that will put us in a good position. And then we do a cost of service next year. An update.
Mark, if we forego this October 1st, say to November 1st, what amount of money did we wouldn't earn? $100,000.
It's what's that?
More than 100,000.
If we delayed.
I'm gonna go to the 23 model, so I'm actually
No,
using.
if we
the current-
delayed for a month, just because there's some
one month.
concern here about the model.
Mhm.
Oh, that's relatively minor. I mean, it's only a 1 year slight adjustment. And I really think it's important to target when it happens. Just because it was, budgeted for October, but that's still a big bill for your customers. It's best to delay that by a month to minimize that impact. Part of the reason is when customers read in the paper that the water rates went up by 3.5%, and then they look at their water bill and they see that it's higher, most of that increased water bill is driven by usage. And they kind of blame it on the rate increase. And so it's best to do it when consumption's dropping off. I think that's what you were trying to get at, isn't it?
Well, I'm just listening to the discussion here by my fellow board members. I'm just concerned about the model.
I think that what Commissioner Gormley was expressing wasn't so much a concern about public perception, but more a concern about the conversation that was happening previously in terms of how we got to these recommended rate increases and wanting to have additional time to work through that. Would that be
Yeah,
accurate?
very good, thank you.
Oh, okay,
Maybe
gotcha.
I'm just being worried more.
I'm comfortable with the 3.5% for 1 year. And then we look at it carefully, including the model questions and all that. This apparently is the model we've used all these years. And you assured us, Mark Dunmeyer, that given the corrected assumptions about the way that which weather data we use, and plus we've had more income this year already, it sounds to me like we're going to be okay for the next year using this model. But I would like to take a look at that and talk about it next year.
It's just
Sooner than later,
Yeah.
seriously.
something we could do too. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Something we can do too is, I think it would be maybe a good idea for the board to go through some of the details of the financial modeling. Just so you understand how we look at it and to get your input on it. And it's only a couple of spreadsheet tabs that lays out the financial modeling. And I think that might be good to get your input if you're open to it.
Not today.
No, not today, not today. No, maybe if you do the update next year, maybe we can go through that.
Right.
Yes.
All right, I think it'd be good to get it sooner, especially if we're gonna talk about some things in October. It'd be good to know, have a baseline that we all think we're talking from the same
We have
place.
some public tonight too that we'll
So-
hear from too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you can share that after the meeting, that would be really good.
I can send you the actual Excel model. I'll cut out those pieces, so it'll be a working snapshot of them, how we look at it.
Okay,
So-
great. And I'm gonna just kind of arrest the future conversations for now. And bring it back to the matter at hand, which is the potential rate increase tonight. Are there any additional questions from commissioners for anybody on staff? Or consultant?
Just for the record, I'm just gonna ask Mr. Dunbar, I know it's in the written materials, but we always ask this question that you're saying that the 3.5 rate increase for this next year would be adequate to provide adequate receipts for maintenance and operation of the system, maintenance adequate reserves and contingencies for contemplated additions and improvements and extensions of the system. Is that correct?
It is correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
real quickly for Mark, this residential bill comparison was in the packet. That's in the record as well.
We're gonna ask the mayor to accept the materials in the packet and also Mr. Dunbar's charts in the record tonight.
And Mark, is the McMinnville proposed rate at the 3.5% or at the?
It's at the 3.5%.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the commission? No. All right, wonderful. At this point, we'll take public comment. And so we'll start with anybody in the room. Would anybody here tonight like to provide public comment to the commission?
Can I ask a couple of very quick questions?
Yes, will you please state your name and address for the record? And actually, maybe if you could join us here so the microphones can pick you up, since we are in a public meeting, we need it to be recorded.
I really just wanted to know if I could access this on the city side. This presentation.
Oh,
It's to be on the McMinnville Water and Light site, not the cities.
just to recap for the record, the presentation tonight's available on the McMinnville Water and Light website. Any additional questions for the commission or from the public at this time?
We have 3 guests in the audience. We normally don't get 4 guests.
So can we assume that the municipalities that Max sells to, that they're.
Could you join us up here? We need your voice to be recorded, and if you could state your name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
Is this good here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And could
My
you-
name is Tom Reed.
Thank you,
My address is actually in Lafayette, 1042 12th Street, Lafayette.
thank you.
We're one of the people who buy from McMinnville. So would it be a safe assumption to assume that our cost will go up 3.5%?
Correct.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you. And then do we have anybody with us on Zoom this evening?
We do not.
Do we have?
Once again, interrupt. Nobody in the audience wants to comment. We got 3 visitors here tonight and it's we don't get visitors very often. Okay, thank you.
And do we have anybody on the phone this evening?
We do not.
We do not. Do the commissioners have any additional questions back for anybody that testified this evening?
No.
No. All right. Any final comments from staff?
Yeah, staff's recommendation is that the commission consider adoption of the 3.5% proposed overall rate adjustments for water. And that I'd also like to offer the information from the commission packet to the mayor, pages 3 through 23, to be admitted as part of the hearing record.
We're also offering no, is that part?
Yeah, just what's in the package.
Just what's in the back, it's all there, okay.
Well, any deliberation by the commission at this point?
I have a quick, we answered the gentleman from Lafayette maybe too quickly. because the volumetric rate is more than 3.5, but the meter size rate is less than 3.5. So we don't really know exactly what it'll be, right?
It depends on how much they use.
Depends on how much you
Yeah, it's
use.
tiered, I think, volumes increases, cost increases the more you use.
Yes, we have,
Yeah.
there's 2 tiers.
So the same, but I think the simple answer is that your rate is based on this rate schedule.
Correct.
But it may be higher depending on what the ratio is between your meter size and your volumetric rate. We just didn't want to confuse this.
Right. Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Any additional comments from the commission? All right, I would entertain a motion to,
Adopt the resolution. Which is what,
perhaps our general counsel could read the resolution for us.
Happy to do that. This is resolution number 2023-15, a resolution by the City of McMinnville Municipal Corporation of the State of Oregon, acting by and through its Water and Light Commission, establishing water rates, customer charges, and fees. That's resolution 2023-15.
Right, and I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Gormley. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor, please. And we'd like to pull the commission, please.
Yes, Mayor Dropkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Aye.
Commissioner Gormley,
aye,
Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Tate.
Aye.
Again, the resolution passes unanimously. We're now going to welcome our Power Resource Manager, Jamie Phillips, up to present. TC
Good
25.
evening. Yes. In the interest of time, I'll try to be concise. I would like to share with the commission the status of BPA process titled TC 25, Terms and Conditions. 25 is a fiscal year it would be implemented. Last February, BPA engaged customers in a series of workshops in an effort to refine and improve its large generator interconnection process. So any new generation that comes onto the system, solar farms, wind farms, whatever it may be, has to go through a multi-stage process of an interconnection procedure for BPA. And that process was not the most efficient. And so BPA undertook this effort with customers to improve that process, and in June offered a settlement based on those conversations with customers, and that is what I'm here sharing with you this evening. BPA has asked for participants to indicate whether they plan to object to the settlement agreement by September 15th. And after engagement with our trade organizations and other customers, the terms and conditions are largely agreeable. They will improve the process potentially significantly. And the PPC and the NRU, both organizations have suggested that customers not object to the settlement proceedings. And so that is what I'm here to get the commission to indicate this evening.
No, we're just gonna.
While this doesn't have any immediate direct impact on water and light, there is an opportunity here for the commission to participate in the process, in a BPA process, and exercise your ability to do so, which we would like to enjoy that opportunity and continue to do that into the future. So the recommendation this evening is for the commission to take a position of not objecting to the settlement proceedings and provide the general manager the authority to communicate.
I'll just comment. Jamie and I, we had discussions with staff from the Public Power Council about taking a position of not objecting. As you see in the packet, there's actually a settlement agreement. But the recommendation from the PPC is not to sign off on the settlement agreement itself. It's just to indicate to BPA, we're not going to object. And if you don't object, if you stay silent, you're essentially, and as you can see in the document, it's going to go into a hearing process where we'll essentially be assenting sort of silently to the agreement. So we could affirmatively sign, authorize and sign the thing. What's being suggested to us is sort of, I guess, keep our powder dry and just not object. And so I don't know, and we're sort of doing this in coordination with the trade group. So that's kind of, and frankly, I find it a bit of an odd thing, but I think that's the best advice we're getting.
Okay, and this has come up before, we did the same. thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it is somewhat of a clunky procedural thing, but it does allow the commission the opportunity to weigh in.
And real quickly, Jamie, is this a step toward what public utilities have asked the government to make the permitting process easier? Essentially, is that what this is?
Well, this was initiated by BPA in response to a large backlog of interconnection requests and a very inefficient process. Those same entities, developers, also probably have interest in PUC regulated
But I
utilities.
think your question is more related to the permitting through Congress with the NEPA process.
Yes, and well, and also just the whole problem of trying to bring resources
Yes.
on, this would be part of it, right? And
This is
a
another
small
piece.
For
piece
BPA
of
customers, yeah.
fixing it, okay, great.
Would you like a motion?
I would take
I can-
unless there's any additional, nope, I would love a
To
motion.
affirm the comments that she had made and vote positive for it.
Yes.
So
This is the motion not to object to the TC 25 tariff settlement, authorize and direct the general manager to communicate this position back to BPA. I think that will be through just a communication, a electronic.
Their tech forum
Tech
portal,
forum.
yes.
Second.
Email. Mhm.
I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley, a second from Chair Tankersley. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
all right,
Those opposed say nay. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. We will adjourn this evening's meeting. We hope you'll all join us over at Civic Center for our very first joint McMinnville Water and Light and City of McMinnville City Council meeting, where we have a very cool interactive map that you can the public can access the map as well, or is
So
it?
I think it was on the link from
Yeah.
the site, so I think you
Yeah.
can. Yeah.
It's a very, very cool interactive map. Story map.
Yes.
Not that-